Hey y'all, welcome to Sidebar with Chinney, number 4. So, this sidebar only covers 2 chapters, but I thought it was important for them to be solely grouped together. And to be honest, the 2 of them are enough on their own. But before we get into them, let's recap. Our last sidebar was quite lengthy. It covered chapters 12 through 20, which basically encompassed the entire relationship between Ken and Shelonda. At its conclusion, it came out that Ron was fully aware that Ken was the person who had attacked him. Consequently, he decided that he'd punish them both by violently beating and raping Shelonda. Additionally, he beat Shelonda again the next day because the rape had cued him into the fact that she wasn't a virgin, and he wanted to punish her for that. So that brings us to chapter 21, She Knew. I didn't want to disclose the title of that episode in the last sidebar because I felt that it would give the storyline away. That's the genius of how my mind works. But anyway, the episode starts with Shelonda saying that Ron began to rape her on a daily basis. Remember that she had previously been able to keep him away in the past by locking her bedroom door at night. But after Ken's court date and Ron's promise to make sure that Shelonda pays, that was no longer enough. He began to rape her at any point in time. She states that he would pounce on her the second she walked in from school. Can you imagine that? Your home is supposed to feel safe. But if you're keeping up, you realize that Shelonda's home hadn't ever been a safe space for her, even before random rape became a common occurrence. Think back. Shelonda's mother moved her into a house with a man that she barely knew. And because the mother prioritized her husband's feelings and propensity towards being an authoritarian, she allowed Ron to create an unnatural relationship dynamic from the beginning. Shelonda was uncomfortable at home because her mother married Ron and she was being forced to call him dad. She got punished for not wanting to do so. And with the mother being pregnant, she became a caretaker for the family, cooking and cleaning. Simultaneously, Ron began to groom her for the sole purpose of being able to be inappropriate with her. After the birth of Cassidy, Shelonda became a caretaker for a baby, while still managing the household. All these things created a set of circumstances where Shelonda was never able to be a child. She never had the comfort of coming home to a safe space where she felt loved and cared for. The responsibility was always hers, not just as it related to managing the household and taking care of Cassidy, but she also had the responsibility of managing the emotions of adults. Shelonda was always cognizant of the fact that one thing or the other could shift the paradigm. If Ron was upset, she understood that she would likely get hit that day. Consequently, she stayed out of his way. She couldn't ever just feel safe. Assuredly, that was a huge part of why Ken was so impactful. He created a sense of security for her. But with him gone, Shelonda doesn't feel that she has a measure of safety. But back to chapter 21. Ron is raping Shelonda every day, and you realize that he enjoys it. He's cruel to Shelonda, making her hang his clothes outside on the clothesline, even though they have a fully functioning washer and dryer in the house. Why? Because it's an exertion of his control over her. She has no choice but to mentally recount the cause of her suffrage. I think the worst part of that is the mental torture of it all. According to the lie that Ron chooses to tell, Shelonda is being punished because he feels that she played a part in Ken's decision to attack him. But if you really think about it, it goes so much deeper than that. Shelonda really had no idea that Ken was going to attack Ron. But let's say she did. Ken attacked Ron because he beat Shelonda up that day. Not only that, but Shelonda told him that Ron had been touching and abusing her since she was 12 years old. I'm sure Ron might disagree, like if he was a real person or something. But most people would think that he was well overdue for somebody to put their paws on him. So now he's telling this girl that she has to pay for that. She has to suffer. she has to get overworked and get sexually abused because someone attempted to create a cushion for the unsafe environment that he created. And it's all her fault. This is why this is happening to you. You did this. Maybe it wasn't ideal at first, but it wasn't this. This is how you made it. That is so manipulative. No one would feel compelled to rape someone as a punishment. It's just ridiculous. But moving on. March rolls around and the phone rings. Apparently, it's someone saying that Mom has been admitted to the hospital. Ron is panicked, but he never answers Shelonda when she asks what's going on. Assuredly, he already knew. They get to the hospital and Ron never asks what happened. Another indicator that he already knew. But what he does ask opens Mom's box of secrets. He asks if the baby's okay. The doctor and nurse look at each other, then break the news that she's not pregnant. Shelonda and Ron are both shocked. Mom looks and acts just like she did when she was pregnant with Cassidy, and that thought reminds Shelonda that Cassidy is still at childcare. Ron leaves to retrieve her, giving Shelonda some time alone to think about how she misses the relationship that she used to have with her mother. But that's quickly overshadowed when she's pulled aside for a sidebar. The nurse asks Shelonda if Ron has been abusing her, and when she denies it, the nurse spills the beans. She tells Shelonda that Mom came in rambling and that her story was concerning. She said that she attempted to commit suicide because her husband was having an affair with her daughter. Mom admitted to faking the pregnancy to get attention, but stated that it worked against her. She also admitted that she had started doing drugs with Ron, but once he started getting clean, he started dangling her drug use over her head as possible ammunition in a custody battle for Shelonda and Cassidy. I think that speaks a lot to his malice as a person. He knew that she was struggling with drug abuse because he had struggled right along with her. He most likely introduced it to her. Opposed to helping her, he capitalized on it, probably to keep her in line. I'm going to say probably to keep her in line like I ain't write it. But because I didn't really say why he was capitalizing on it, I'll create the assumption. Either way, the nurse tells Shelonda that she can help her if she tells the truth. But Shelonda understands that the truth comes with possible implications of its own. She goes down a mental list, ending with her leaving the house and Ron touching Cassidy in her absence. The thought of that makes her sick and she throws up in the trash can. The nurse asks if she's pregnant, which she denies, but when asked if she wants to take a test, she agrees. Of course, it's positive. Shelonda convinces the nurse that she's pregnant by a boyfriend, that Ron hasn't ever touched her. But once she's back in Mom's room, she breaks down. In that one brief moment, she has to come to terms with a lot. Her mother tried to commit suicide. Her mother was on drugs. And after a few years of struggling to be a full-time caretaker for a child that wasn't even hers, she realizes that Cassidy was likely developmentally delayed as a result of said drug abuse. Although there was an indication that Shelonda suspected she was pregnant, she now knows for sure. And because Ken has been locked up, she knows the baby is Ron's. And the worst part about it all is the fact that Mom's confession lets her know that she obviously knew that Ron was abusing her the whole time. And that takes us to chapter 22, hardship. Shelonda obviously has issues with her mother by that point, so she never even visited the hospital after that day. And who could blame her? If I was Shelonda, I'd likely hold both Mom and Ron equally culpable. No one can control the behavior of another, so Ron would have been a predator under any circumstances. But as a mother, having that information and doing nothing is just as bad as doing it. And because she didn't intervene, Shelonda was left with consequences that she hadn't ever intended for her life. So yeah, I'd take issues with her too. But it got worse because once she was released from the hospital, Mom allowed everything to just happen in the open. The drug habit that had been a closely guarded secret was no longer a secret. Mom didn't do drugs out in the open, but she stopped hiding out in her room when she was high. She was mean and belligerent. Ron also stopped hiding his attraction toward Shelonda. He said sexual things to her out in the open, which was uncomfortable. He got into bed with Shelonda at night and woke up in her bed in the morning. Mom was fully aware of these things, yet she said nothing. Shelonda knows that her mother knows, so she doesn't have to do the mental back and forth that she had done in the past. She doesn't have to wonder if she should tell it. She's aware that her mother knows and that she's not going to protect her. And that's such an unsafe emotional place for a child. She's aware that Ron has the power to do as he pleases, and there's no one to stop him. And even with all of that going on, Ron is still managing to be a preacher. Sunday rolls around and they're all in the same cycle of dysfunction. Shelonda is preparing to cook breakfast before she, Cassidy, and Ron attend church to, as she says, watch the devil do his work. But her box gets open once again because Mom purchased sweet maple sausages from the store. The smell of them makes Shelonda sick and she starts throwing up in the kitchen sink. I think we can all agree that that's disgusting, but that's beside the point. Mom doesn't take the time to check on Shelonda. She begins to argue about her throwing up in the sink, then she stops mid-sentence when she puts it together. She asks Shelonda if she's pregnant, and Shelonda can't even hold it in anymore. I find it interesting that Shelonda immediately starts apologizing. In her words, without thinking about it, I blurted out that I was sorry. I really was sorry. I was sorry for the predicament that I was in. I was sorry that Mom had to find out in the way that she did. I was sorry for the obvious hurt that Mom was experiencing. There was no good way for the situation to have played out, and I was sorry. Let's think about that for a second. Shelonda's pregnant, and she has been keeping the secret to herself. She hasn't told anyone, not even Sharon. She has been carrying the burden of being pregnant by her mother's husband, not the result of a consensual affair, but the result of brutal rape, consistent and constant brutal rape. That's mentally grueling enough, but she has also had to live with the understanding that her mother was aware of the abuse. This girl is going through a lot. Yet, when the cat gets out of the bag, she apologizes because she feels bad about how Mom feels and about the way she had to find out. That is extremely typical of people who have been abused. They apologize when they're not at fault. They have been groomed to see themselves as less valuable. Thus, they don't identify as victims. Shelonda's mind immediately went to the hurt that someone else was feeling, someone who she saw as a victim in the situation. In her mind, her mom was a victim. She had hurt her mom, even though it's obvious, very obvious, that her mother was the one who had let her down. And her mother didn't let up off of her one bit. She called her a whore and kept in line with all of the things that Shelonda heard about growing up. Shelonda's mom blamed her for seducing her husband. She made her feel less valuable by telling her that she'd never have her husband, as if that was her intention all along. All while knowing that he had been touching her for years. And we know she knew because she told the nurses at the hospital. She told Shelonda that she wished death upon her and everything that was connected to her. She told her that she'd raise her baby alone and to leave and never return. Shelonda decides that her only option is to go to Grandma's. She packs, but realizes Grandma is still in church. She calls Sharon because she knows that she can sit there until Grandma gets home. She tells Sharon about the argument with Mom, excluding Ron's involvement. And in a turn of events, Sharon asks if she's pregnant by Ron. Now, I'm going to tell y'all, I messed that up real bad. I was supposed to say, though I was surprised by her knowledge, I nodded yes and asked her how she knew. But for some reason, I ended up saying that I was surprised by her lack of knowledge. Look, I don't even know how or why I said that. It made absolutely no sense contextually, but it had been a fairly good take otherwise, so I just let it go. Anyway, how did Sharon just guess that? She didn't, of course. Sharon admits that Ron is her uncle, and she had gotten her pregnant when she was 14. She had moved into the family house with her mother and sister, and Ron had done the same thing that he did to Shelonda. But her mom handled it by sending her away to a home for unwed teens and bribing Ron for money. I think it's unfortunate that Sharon was forced to pretend that it never happened, and she still had to be around Ron and be cordial to him. Years later, she brings Shelonda into the salon, and he says that he changed, and he asks her not to mention their past to Shelonda. He offers to bring Shelonda in every week and to pay Sharon extra money. Needing the money, she accepts, but she softly pries to see if Ron is abusing her. That makes Shelonda feel even worse about leaving Cassidy with Ron, but she knows there's nothing she can do. In the end, Sharon convinces Shelonda that she'll be better off having an abortion because of her own experience of giving her baby away, and the understanding that Shelonda doesn't have the type of support that she'll need as a teen mom. I messed that part up too, but anyway. Shelonda agrees. She has the abortion, moves in with Sharon, and starts helping her out at the salon. She finds that life is looking up because she doesn't have to deal with Ron and Mom. She has a friend and a confidant in Sharon, and she's learning a life skill at the salon. She finally feels safe. That all sounds good, right? So what could go wrong? Well, the next episode is titled The Signs Were There. And while Shelonda's life gets better in one way, it gets absolutely the worst in another. We only have 2 more episodes left, and then we're on to season 2. Join me next time for the final season 1, Sidebar with Chinney. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Chinney Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in purchasing books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.